Hello everybody, welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty. It is time for another Mystery Box Monday, where I dive into my mystery basket of crafting supplies and cook up one interesting project. So let's dive in. Here is my mystery box. It is a box of jam-packed goodies from a store that was going out of business that I've had for about 2 years now, and it is almost empty. I will get this project out of it and maybe one more project out of it. I'm kind of scared that the last bits in here are exactly the same, but as I pull out things for this project, I am feeling a couple of different shapes, so I'm trying to go for those so that I don't end up with 3 bottles of glitter glue. And yes, I always pull out 3 mystery products when I get started on these projects. And as soon as I see these items, I try to think about how I can use brown and sprinkles together, and that instantly makes me think of chocolate cake, and so that is where I am going with this. We are going to make a birthday card, but we're going to zhuzh it up a bit and create a shaped card from scratch. A lot of people will do this with die cutting machines and dies, but you don't have to have all of that stuff to make a shaped card. You can do it by hand. It just takes a little bit of effort, and I will show you all the steps along the way. So I created a basic card base there, and I did trim off the end a little bit. Now I'm kind of measuring to see how big I want my cake to be. And the reason I trimmed off that end a little bit, we'll get to later, so stick around and we'll talk about why. So I cut off strips from the leftover cardstock. I am using a heavy-duty cardstock. If you're going to make a shaped card that will stand up on its own, you do want to use heavy cardstock. And this is the heavy Neenah cardstock that is put out by scrapbook.com. I don't know if that differs from other Neenah cardstocks, but I like it and it works fine for me. All right, so those strips I am going to cut down a little bit narrower for each tier of my cake. And then I have a couple of corner rounding punches that we're going to give shape to the edges of the cake. I use a bigger corner rounder for the biggest layer on the cake, and then I will use a smaller corner rounder for the other 2 layers. I believe my bottom layer of the cake is 1.5 inches tall, and the other 2 are 1.25 inches tall. So as I layer these up, it will appear as if the cake has actual layers to it. And then pulling out that ink pad that I got out of my mystery box, I'm going to go ahead and color up these layers of cake. My corner rounders are getting a little bit on the old side and starting to kind of fray at the edges. I will hopefully get a new corner rounder soon. I did find one that I like that hopefully will punch through multiple layers. But anyway, I digress. Let's move on to the shaped part of this card. And this is going to require a little bit of math and a little bit of drawing. So using a grid, which I highly recommend, doesn't have to be this matte, but any kind of grid, I centered my card on the paper, and then from the center mark, I measured out like 1/4 of an inch on each side to create the base of a cake stand. And then to create the actual foot of the cake stand, I measured out another inch on each side, and then I just drew a line from the center of the stem of the cake stand toward those edges and just kind of rounded it off as it got closer to the edge where I marked that 1 inch width. Now, this is a little bit of drawing, but it really isn't hard drawing. What we're doing is making straight lines with a ruler, and then we're just kind of curving edges around those lines. So it doesn't take a huge amount of art skill to do this. Don't let it scare you away, because as you can see here, I've got my straight line, and then I'm just kind of underneath that drawing a bit of a curved line along the bottom of that, and that will be my final edge. And then along the top of that, I'm drawing a little bit more of a curved line, which will be the effect of the plate going around behind the cake. Only I drew my lines too small, so I'm going to redo it. So here you can see me drawing the curved edges of the cake plate there, and then the curved edge of the bottom of the cake plate. And that straight line will be where my cake will actually rest. So, not too hard. I do erase this back really to a very faint line. I did it dark just so you could see it on camera. I will be covering this up with that Stickles glitter glue, so mostly those pencil lines won't be showing, but I do want to erase them as much as possible just in case. Now it is time to layer up the cake as I think it will sit on my card. And then I use some temporary adhesive to kind of hold everything in place because I am going to trace around this cake. And that is what we are going to use to cut this into a shaped card. Now, doing a little bit of measuring again from the center of that card, I just picked a number to measure out from the center points on either side to stay the hinge for the card. You could make this much narrower, but I think it works better if the hinge is a little bit wider. It just adds a little more stability to the card. But play around with some thinner cardstock and see what you like. The thicker cardstock will be a little more sturdy, so if you get to a point where your thin cardstock isn't working, that width will probably work on a thicker cardstock. All right, so I just cut this top portion of the cardstock first, and we will get to the other portion later. But first I want to finish off the top portion because that's going to matter for tracing and trimming our bottom portion. All right, for my cake leaders, I am going to pop these up on foam dots. I will put a single row of foam dots where the two cake layers will overlap, and then a double layer of foam dots on that bottom of the base cake layer because that will give more dimension to this. So the next cake layer gets its own foam dots, and when the bottom overlaps with the second layer, that ends up being 2 layers of foam dots all together. And then that middle layer is 1 layer of foam dots, and then the bottom layer is glued straight down to the base. So hopefully all of that layering made sense. Go back and rewatch that part, and you can slow down the video using the YouTube tricks of slowing down the video if you need to see it a little bit slower. All right, once all of that is in place, now I can trace around it to the back side of the cardstock, and we can cut this out. Couple tips here. I do like to trim off all the excess of the cardstock before I start trimming. I will trim on the inside of my pencil line because, believe it or not, pencil lead does have a thickness to it. And if you trim on the outside of that pencil line, it's going to make your cardstock a little bit bigger than the top layer. So when you close your card, you'll see a white rim around it. And then you'll have to erase the pencil line. So if you cut on the inside, just barely on the inside of your pencil line, that'll give you a clean look all around and turn it into a shaped card really easily. When you close your card, if you see any little off spots, go ahead and clean them up. It's really not too complicated, and this shape is pretty easy to cut out. And if you trim off all that excess in the beginning, then you'll have an easier time getting into nooks and crannies because thicker cardstock really is harder to fussy cut, but you can do it. So, and this one isn't complicated fussy cutting, so you can do it, and it's worth it for a shaped card. What I did here was just trim off, I think these are 1/4 inch slices of paper, and I'm going to create candles out of these. So this is a little bit more drawing and trimming, and I've zoomed in here a little bit so you can hopefully see a little bit better, but I'm just kind of creating these candles with a little bit of a cat's eye shape for the flame, and then just angling off the shoulders of the candle so that it looks a little bit like it's been melting. And this is where I realized I should check and make sure it's going to fit in my envelope. That is why I trimmed off the base of the card earlier so that I could add the length of the candles to my card, but I didn't trim off quite enough and my candles were too long. I popped them loose, trimmed those candles shorter, glued them back in place, and we're good to go. All right, because I colored my cardstock here with that Distress Oxide ink, which is water reactive, I wanted to try this technique of using water to kind of draw frosting edges onto my cake. I did ink up a little bit of a scratch to practice to see if it would work. I should have gone with a slightly smaller paintbrush because water will spread a little bit before it finally dries to the final kind of ink lifting properties that it has, and because it did spread, I lost some of the detail of my little swirls that I was doing. It's okay, it's fine. If you don't want to mess with any of that, you can try a white ink pen, but the white pen will probably soak up some of that color from the Distress Oxide ink because that ink is really a strong kind of ink. But there's other ways to decorate your cake. You could just put these sprinkles on if you want. You could use sequins. You could use a tiny punch and punch out stars or hearts or whatever you want to do to add decoration to your cake. And then because I have these sprinkles in my mystery ingredients, my cake is going to get some lovely sprinkles. I am trying to make sure there's a wide range of colors going on to my cake so that this is a general neutral cake. I have issues with genderizing colors for people, but I know a lot of people do feel that way. So I'm going to keep my colors very neutral and make it for everybody. All right, and then I'm just going to glue these all down. And then I grab a couple markers to finish off the flames of my candles. I'm just using a yellow and an orange to add a little bit of different color depth to the candles. I will give you a bit of a close-up, and there that is. And then for the rest of the card, I am going to use this glitter glue. Now, like I said, my mystery box has been sitting around for a couple of years, and this glitter glue is getting a little bit gummy, so it was kind of hard to work with. But I made it work. I covered up my cake plate, and I'm going to go ahead and do my candles to kind of balance out that glitter glue from the top to the bottom of the cake. I think it kind of quote-unquote bookends the visual imagery quite nicely. And so that will wrap up this handmade cake-shaped greeting card. I will show you a couple of pictures of that after it is dry, which I do let it dry flat so that that cake stand has the most chance of staying flat for standing up the card later. And one final note, I did go ahead and use a white gel pen to add that frosting detail. I hope you enjoyed this process video. I hope you will join me for the very last of this series. I don't know if it will be returning in 2025. We shall see. And until then, I hope you have an artful day.